everybody. Hello, Africa. My name is Claude Gatebuke from Rwanda. We are here on this conference, united as Africans from around the continent, because of what we're seeing happening in South Africa to our sisters and brothers down in South Africa from various African countries. And we just wanted to come together as a group of Africans to show that we're not gonna just sit and watch what's happening and do nothing and say nothing. And we encourage all other Africans to also get involved, and also anyone else that's moved to get involved. We want you to get involved. But without further ado, I just want to turn it over to my colleagues on this conference to go ahead and kind of talk about our reaction to what's happening, and what is our call to action from each individual person, just as a united front of young Africans who are very concerned about other Africans all over the continent, including in South Africa, South Africans and non-South Africans. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Bonita to start.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bonita. I'm from South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa. And just growing up in South Africa in general, there's always been violence against women and children. And, you know, it's getting worse and worse as the time has gone by. And, you know, we are just, I'm just on this call to show my support and just show my disgust as well, because it is disgusting and gross what's happening to women and children. And not just women, men as well, but especially women and children. It's just sickening. And we have got to figure out something to stop the violence in general.
Hi, everyone. My name is Esnard Christian, formerly Esnard Sakala from Zambia. Zambia is my heart. That is my home. Africa is my heart. That's my home. I'm so humbled to be part of a group of Africa United. It doesn't matter whether we're from the east, west, south, north, we are Africa United. It is so sad for me to see what's going on in South Africa. It's heartbreaking what's happening to, you know, young people, old people, people from, you know, that horrible feeling that you can be that other, that, you know, that fear of the other to somebody who looks just like you. These are our brothers, these are our sisters, and we are killing each other, you know, and it's so very, very sad for me. So my call to action is, you know, for both sides of this xenophobic argument, you know, let's get together, let's have a real discussion. You know, what is so fearful about foreigners? What is so fearful? What can we do to create some kind of an impasse here? Because this is not sustainable for anybody. We are going to wipe out generations of people, you know. We need to be Africa United. We need to do something to make sure that we are preserving our people, preserving our heritage, instead of killing and hurting each other. So that is my call to action, especially young people, because young people always mobilize, you know, great movements. Any great movement is always started by young people. So my call to action is going to be for the younger African generation. Let's do something. Amen.
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Fred Mwebia. I'm from Kampala, Uganda, born and raised in Uganda, but I've traveled around a bit. I've been to, you know, some countries. Like I was saying, on Monday, I actually got a call from one of my friends. He's working in South Africa, and he was asking me to pray for him. So definitely I asked him what was going on, because we had taken some time without talking. And then he told me the attacks are back. So it was very heartbreaking. You know, the news had not yet widely spread. And on Tuesday, yeah, on Tuesday, I went to Twitter and started tweeting about the news and started asking everyone to encourage people not to carry out what comes to my mind is we're living in a very, very sensitive community today, and yet we need to be very, very united. We have given up the values that we really cherish as people that come from this continent to things that are reacting to politics, reacting to economic forces, and we've forgotten the Ubuntu, the brotherhood that we are supposed to share. My call would be, because you see, for us to be able to sort that problem, we're not going to deny that it's got an economic part and it's got a political part on it. One of the things that I think we need to do in our generation as young people, because we need an Africa that is workable for us and for our children. And it is very, very serious that it's not only about South Africa. We must all be concerned. We must not watch anyone go to turmoil and, you know, just listen on to say that's all we can do. So I'm calling upon us all to encourage our governments, because I feel that is level number one. You see, the challenge I've seen in South Africa is people don't want to accept the fact. You know, we're seeing all the information coming out. We have some friends out there telling us everything, but the officials don't want to come out and say the truth. And, you know, the first level of dealing with something that is bad is accepting that it's happening, and then we deal with it. And that's what I think we need to do. We need to be open about this. If there is racism, if there is tribalism, if there is a lot of nepotism in any of our governments, we need to come out and talk about it. Otherwise, it's not worthwhile for us to start fighting each other when we actually know we are supposed to be united. So it's very disheartening. I'm actually very emotional about the subject, that I have had to keep away from my Twitter, because every time I go out and read the content, it feels very, very sad. And I don't know what my kids will think about a generation when we're old and, you know, people stand and raise hands to beat one another for reasons that we would have avoided. Thank you so much.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is KAYO, BESHIR. I'm from Ethiopia, but I grew up in Kenya, Uganda, and I appreciate you, Clive, for setting this up. You know, for me, over the weekend, seeing such, I like to think about it as Afrophobia almost, where our own people are doing this to each other. You know, we as African brothers, myself growing up in so many countries, country like Kenya welcomed me as a refugee. At the end of the day, we all brothers and sisters, and, you know, high employment and limited economic resources plays a big factor in what's going on in South Africa right now. But, you know, it is just so unfortunate, you know, as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat everywhere, you know. So seeing that come out of us as brothers and sisters, you know, and then it doesn't help that the leaders of, you know, the president of South Africa coming out and speaking very late. The African Union has almost been silent, and anybody else that has condemned it, I think condemnation is good, but it's not enough, you know. So us as the younger generation that understand that these borders drawn around the African continent was, you know, by the past white colonizers and things like that, and we can look over that. And I think my call to action is just how we can continue seeing each other as brothers and sisters, and look past, you know, our differences and just think about more of how similar we are. So I think Fred touched on a lot of the points that I wanted to touch on, but you know, just I'm really excited about our generation, but it's really unfortunate that in 2019, our own are doing this to our own, you know. So Nigeria, South Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, whatever have you, this should not be something going on amongst our people. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you guys about what's going
on. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter MUTABARUKA from Rwanda, but I have roots in Tanzania. I'm happy to lend my voice to this appeal with my fellow Africans. And one thing that I can say is that I believe that we are fortunate now to be able to speak to all Africans, to be able to get this message out there using social media and the internet, something that we couldn't do many years ago. And I believe as a result of special interest and other people with special, with other cynical plans for Africa, we're able to inject ideas and systems which are resulting in what's happening right now in Africa and even in South Africa. But my appeal is that Africans, we cannot resort to violence against each other. I believe that what's happening in South Africa is preposterous. And I think that we as Africans have to stand up and to speak out against this violence. but also to speak to our fellow brothers and sisters in South Africa and in other places to say that we are Africans. The borders that we see right now in Africa, they are man-made. These are not borders which came from our ancestral history. And I believe that when we say an African or a Black African is an African country, we cannot separate them by what labels we've been put upon us by colonialism and other things that we all know about. I also want to just make an appeal, I think, to Africans who are not in South Africa. We've seen reports of other violence happening in Nigeria and other places as a result of what's happening in South Africa. I believe that all of us Africans, from our culture and from our understanding of oneness and Ubuntu, as someone mentioned, we ought to embrace one another and come against this violence in one voice.
All right, good day, everyone. My name is Akona Fagutse from Swaziland, Eswatini. As you know, we are neighbors to South Africa. And so the take in Swaziland is definitely not the stance that is being taken by the Black South Africans in South Africa. I'd say everyone in Swaziland supports this call or this type of reaction or response. My personal reaction is that what is happening in South Africa is kind of, I always hate, to blame things on history, but with the Boers coming in about 200 or so years ago, we wouldn't expect the effects to be cut off in less than 30 years or so. So it's unfortunate what's happening. Violence should never be the answer to anything. I personally believe in dialogue, in solving every single situation. Violence is never the answer. What I would say, well, my call of action is, firstly, to all other African states, is to say, let's be patient with our South African brothers and sisters as they recover from the trauma of living under apartheid rule. I had an opportunity to live in the US for some time, and here and there you still see the effects of slavery, which has been ended way much before. So my call is, guys, let's be patient. Let's engage in dialogue at every opportunity. And yeah, they'll see the light. It might take a very long time, and it might be hard to understand why people would do this or who's driving it. But mine is, violence is never the answer, and dialogue is the way to go. Thank you.
My initial reaction initially was extremely emotional because I've experienced, extreme violence and seeing the violence, and I was really triggered by seeing the images of the women getting beat down and stripped down to nothing, people being burnt. I mean, just all kinds of craziness, people getting beaten and just mobbed with hand weapons. I think for sure there is a root cause to why the people in South Africa are doing what they're doing and the way that they're reacting to the conditions that they're in. And I believe the conditions themselves, as many of you have said, are a result of apartheid rule that just ended 30 years ago. But also there is an economic factor. And maybe without going into too much of what I think, a friend of mine from Zimbabwe, Shingi, sent me a text earlier today about this, and he said, I think the root cause is poverty. So the people lash out at foreigners who are working hard and succeeding. The government is quiet because the spotlight is on them and their failure to educate and provide jobs for the impoverished citizens. And I actually agree with Shingi on top of agreeing that this is a result of the apartheid rule in South Africa. But there is serious inequality in South Africa. And I think for sure what's happening, the reaction by the South African people who are out in the streets and going after the foreigners and the non-South Africans is they're lashing out at the wrong people. It's definitely the wrong reaction because violence is not going to help. It's not going to solve the issues. And they're also going after the wrong people because these are just, most of the people they're going after are poor people, and it's not going to resolve these economic problems that there is in South Africa. But my call to action, the thing that hurts the most, I think beyond the violence, is the silence by so many people in South Africa. I was happy to see that we started the call with a South African woman just saying that, you know, showing her disappointment and disgust at what's happening. And I appreciate every South African that stepped up and called out their own government and called out the South African people and asked them to stop. I mean, you can't, when you see somebody getting beat down and not a single person says stop it, it just doesn't make sense. And so I appreciate that from the South Africans. I appreciate the various organizations. I saw earlier today there was a soccer team, Kaiser Chief, that a bunch of their players issued a statement. But I also think the rest of Africa, you know, we need to hold our brothers and sisters in South Africa accountable. I agree that we need to be patient because the issues of apartheid are not going to, you know, end in just 30 years. However, we also need to hold them accountable. We've got to, this South African government is just watching it. And you can tell the reason they're watching is because it takes away the responsibility. They're looking at the wrong people for well, a real problem. And the people are lashing out and the government is sitting in the background and just kind of watching it happen. The other thing is, I think I appreciate the African countries that have taken action. I've seen protests in Zambia. I've seen protests in Congo. I think the rest of us Africans, wherever we are, we should be showing up in front of the South African embassies and inconvenience the host countries who are saying nothing about what's happening in South Africa. And shame on the African Union. This is what the real African Union looks like. When Africans are hurting, you show up, speak up, and condemn what's happening to them. The African Union hasn't said anything. The African Union, I'm not sure what it's uniting. What is it uniting? And as has been said on this call, I don't want to go on too long. So my call to action is wherever we are, whether it's in Africa or Western countries or Eastern countries, we should be organizing and showing up at the South African embassies and calling out their government for the response to this violence. The second thing, everybody has some amount of media reach within our social media reach, or for those of us who have the opportunities to be in mass media to really make this issue. It's not just a South Africa issue. This is happening in so many other African countries, but it's usually done by the police and the soldiers in those countries where it's happening. And we just kind of like chalk it up to, oh, it's just politics. No, just because a South African civilian saying or doing something and condemning them is no different than a policeman from another country doing the same thing. And I just think that we absolutely have to look at Africa as a whole and bring this whole unity. I like the fact that, you know, this is bringing all of the regions of Africa together. We are missing one region, North Africa, but I'm sure in the future we'll have more of Africa represented here. But all of the parts of Africa are represented here. This is what African unity looks like. This is what we should be doing. We should be looking for what action to take, what to do, how do we, what do we tell the rest of our African brothers and sisters? What do we share as our message on how to respond to this violence? Violence is definitely not the answer. What's happening in Nigeria and Congo, where there is looting and things like that, is not going to help the situation. But I do think that we have means to make our voices heard in absence of the various, so many of the governments just totally being absent. I think ordinary people, we should take this into our own hands and make sure that we put a stop to this. And that's why I'm asking all the South African citizens, almost 60 million. Those of you who disagree with this violence, make your voices heard. And Africans everywhere, make your voices heard wherever you are. Take action. Silence is consent. Whoever's quiet about this, or is looking the other way, or is looking at something to make themselves feel good, this is only just, you know, it could happen to you, it could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. And thankfully, and hopefully it's not your family, but it's somebody's family member. Just think about that. And that's all my, that's my appeal and call to action.
So my name is Bismarck, a Ghanaian, and I'm actually speaking from Ghana. Actually, this is such an unfortunate incident. We are supposed to be brothers as Africans. We are supposed to be brothers. And we've all seen how our African brothers and sisters in the diaspora are always treated by the citizens of the Western world. But, you know, come to think of this, if we are from the same continent and we are not united, we always kill one another, then I think that one will give the whites the opportunity. It will give them the strength to always subject us to racism. Now, coming to the issue of South Africa, this is an issue that keeps flaring up almost every 2 to 3 years. And I think that the successive governments in South Africa have not done enough to stop this perennial attacks, or do I say biennial attacks? Yes. It's really unfortunate. It's really, really unfortunate that we can all attest to the fact that when South Africa was under the infamous apartheid system, we have learned that most African countries came to their aid to assist in cash and in kind, and Nigeria is no exception. I recently gathered that Nigeria was the most contributed country, the country that contributed a lot towards the liberation of the Black South Africans from the oppressors' rule. So it is really disheartening that upon all that, the elders who actually were the main who were the main victims of the apartheid system seem to be silent. Maybe the government also thinks that, okay, if we insist that the people should stop the attacks, we may end up losing votes. Because I think that the ANC as a political party, the ANC as a party that plays fatherly role in the country has not done enough to stop the attacks. And it's like most political parties are afraid to come out for fear of losing votes. It's really disheartening. 3 days ago, I had opportunity to view a video where somebody was being burnt alive. It was really disheartening. It was so disheartening. And I'm also surprised that the African Union has not also done enough to curtail this situation. And this means that the mission and the vision for which African Union was set up have really been defeated, because African Union only pay lip service. We don't see any actions from them. United Nations, in fact, their reactions are almost minimal. I don't know whether they actually showing apathy towards what is going on in South Africa. Maybe it's because the attacks are not affecting majority of the members who are from outside Africa. Maybe that is why they are silent about it. With the solution, well, there are two schools of thought actually. Some of them are saying that the foreigners over there engage in all forms of illegal activities. Others are also saying that the foreigners, the African migrants, have taken over the market in South Africa. Well, with this second school of thought, I won't buy it. There's no way I'm going to buy it, because We all do trading. We are all into business, and business is all about competition. And with the issue of criminality, there are laws in every country. So if you think someone is committing a crime, the best way to do is to hand the person over to the law enforcers. But if you take the law into your own hands, then it means the country which you come from is in a state of anarchy. The country is really turning into, we say, a banana republic. There is no order. Everybody does what he or she thinks is right. And I am, as I said, let me reiterate this. I'm highly surprised that some elders in South Africa are really silent about this, which means that secretly they endorse what the majority of the youth are doing. They're endorsing it. Now, to end it all, I think there's a way out of this situation. The issue cannot be solved by the South African government unless the government in the respective African countries create jobs for their people. When you create jobs for your people, there's no way somebody will say, I'm traveling to South Africa to do business over there or to find jobs. At least the person will be more willing to stay in his or her homeland and then create business. As simple as that. I think yesterday, the South African High Commissioner to Ghana had a press conference in Accra, and she stated that the government in the respective African countries should create jobs for their citizens to prevent them from traveling to South Africa. Well, there are many people who disagree. There are many people who thought that the High Commissioner was being undiplomatic, but that's the reality on the ground. If the atmosphere is conducive enough to do business in your country, why do you have to travel to South Africa? We have to stay in our country to make it a better place. We don't need to travel elsewhere. Traveling elsewhere to do business or in search of jobs will place your country at a disadvantage point. That is the bitter truth that many people are finding it hard to swallow. And to touch on the issue of reprisal attacks in Nigeria, well, I think two wrongs never make a right. The Nigerians shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the MTN and then the ShopRite offices in Nigeria have Nigerian employees. So if you decide to go and vandalize the place, it is like cutting your nose to spite your face. You are rendering your fellow citizens jobless. So I think the Nigerians should also keep calm as the government in South Africa and then Nigeria are finding pragmatic way of resolving this situation. This is my submission for now. Thank you very much.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for this opportunity that we've had. It's quite a unique opportunity that we're discussing issues across Africa. We should be having this kind of discussions every other time, because we have so many other issues across Africa apart from South Africa. We have issues in Cameroon, we have issues in Morocco, we have issues in DRC. I think we should be having more and more opportunities to discuss them. As far as the issues in South Africa are concerned, I want to start by talking about taking political responsibility. I've been very keen to watch and see what some of our brothers and sisters from South Africa are saying, and some of them are very upbeat about not taking responsibility as a country. And one major issue in Africa is that we like abortioning blame, and we never actually take responsibility. As a country, South Africa needs to take responsibility of what is happening, because in essence, what's happening in South Africa is a crime against the rest of Africans. And for our brothers and sisters in South Africa, they need to take responsibility. I've been saying that there are so many divergent views as far as the issues are in South Africa are concerned. But for me, I've been very keen to see how many people out there, or how many leaders out there, and how many Africans out there are condemning the issues that are happening in South Africa. And I've been very vocal by saying that for me, it's not time to send love to South Africa or, preach love. For me, it's all about condemning this behavior that is that seems to be taking root in South Africa, because it's not the first time it's happening. And we've been seeing the leaders in South Africa, the kind of response from the police, some of the strong views and comments from the leaders, like the deputy or the assistant, I think, minister for police, and of course some of the views from the president Cyril Ramaphosa himself some time back. I believe that us, like Africans, we are integrated. We are one nation. We should be able to discuss issues in South Africa, as well as issues in Morocco, as well as issues in Kenya, or across Africa as one people, despite the colonial political borders that we were imposed some times back. So for me, it is more of, asking our brothers in South Africa to take responsibility. And it's okay to take responsibility and be ashamed as a country, rather than try to shift the blame to someone else. And I've seen this as a decay in the kind of leadership that is in South Africa. And of course, it is something that is happening across Africa. We have the same problems across Africa in other areas, like, of course, in my own country, in Kenya. We can't be, we cannot just say that we are better than the people in South Africa. We have some other problems that if we look into them keenly, you'll just realize that there is some sort of deteriorating leadership across Africa. So I've been asking my brothers and sisters from South Africa to actually be able to look at those issues keenly and realize where their problem lies, and try to solve that problem. The economic issues in South Africa are not unique to other areas in Africa, like especially in Kenya, or of course in Tanzania and other places. We almost have the same economic problems that our brothers in South Africa are facing. But I've been looking at that issue in South Africa, and from my own view is that it is more of their leadership is letting them down, because the situation in terms of fixing the economic problems that has led to the situation that they are facing at the moment is actually the big issue here. So I also want to make a call of action to our brothers in DRC. And of course, we have seen our brothers also in Nigeria retaliating, and the violence that we've seen in Nigeria and Lubumbashi in DRC. I want to call the rest of Africa to become, because fighting each other, we are one nation. We are the black people of Africa, and of course we have other people who are not necessarily black, but they identify themselves as Africans. We are a continent that is supposed to be a country. We are a nation. We are one nation. So someone said yesterday that the economic situation in South Africa has been a crisis for some time. We are seeing a lot of income disparities in South Africa. We are seeing a few black ruling elites getting more and more richer. We are seeing economic disparities in terms of the white and the black majority in South Africa. These are some of the issues that the South African government should actually sit and decide and decide on them. Once and for all, because as the time goes by, some statistics were being thrown about. I don't know the veracity of these statistics, that about 5% is controlled by the white minority in South Africa, while the rest are relegated to the other side of poverty. I don't know, even companies are being controlled by the white minority, the big companies. So these are some of the challenges, and we are seeing this because over time, as the time has been going by, this crisis has been growing, and the leaders that we are electing, who are the black majority who are actually ruling South Africa at the moment, including Cyril Ramaphosa himself, they have not been very keen in terms of solving these problems, these economic problems. So the income disparities and of course the economic issues are actually, I think, they are the ones that are forcing those people to do what they are doing. But in the end, we are saying that it is not justified to just, burn someone alive or beat someone to death just because you think he's taking over your job or you think he's taking over an economic zone that you're supposed to be. But as Africans, I feel so sad. I mean, I felt really really sad, and I've seen some news flash a few minutes ago that I've seen that Air Tanzania suspended scheduled flights to South Africa. I've seen Zambia radio station bans South African music. Of course, we've seen the closure of the embassy in DR Congo. So these are some of the things. I mean, it's just sad that we are fighting amongst ourselves as African brothers. And I want to say this with a lot of emotion that there have been issues in the in the central African, like the Eastern DRC. We're looking at Burundi. We're looking at issues in Rwanda, and of course the Central African Republic. Some of these issues have been ongoing for quite some time, but we find that Africans don't even want to talk about these things. I mean, South Africa can be a case of its own, but the issues that are happening, things that are taking place in Rwanda, in Eastern Congo, even in Morocco, even in Cameroon, the Amazonian, the crisis of the Anglophone and the Francophone. I mean, we've seen people, children being killed by soldiers, women being killed by soldiers. So I want to, relate these issues happening in, especially the central part of Africa, to the issues in South Africa, and say that a conversation should have started long time ago, because for the first time, I'm seeing the rest of Africa having a conversation as far as the xenophobic attacks are going on in South Africa. So I think it's an opportunity for us to have that clarion call across Africa and say that it is not only South Africa where we see this kind of issues. We have more serious issues. We have soldiers killing children, women, and killing, just shooting at, blindly at women in Cameroon. So it's like, for me, it's like a wake-up call that the rest of Africa needs to start discussing the problems that are happening in Africa, because we actually never do this. And I'm happy, but for the first time, we have a very serious conversation in Kenya about South Africa. The issues in South Africa have been trending in Kenya, social media, and of course the mainstream media for the last 3 days. And Kenyans have been having a passionate conversation. We've been calling upon the Kenyan government to issue a statement, because some of the people who are being attacked in South Africa are also Kenyans. And we are glad that our Minister for Foreign Affairs, she issued a statement today and urged the South African government to take more action. So for me, I'm seeing it as an opportunity that, and thank you for everyone participating here, because I'm seeing it as an opportunity. We start having these conversations of issues that are happening across Africa, because surely if we don't have this kind of discussion, the African Union is quiet. They are not saying, and up to even this moment, the African Union doesn't say anything. The African Union has never said anything about the Eastern Congo. The African Union has never said anything about the Central African Republic that has actually gone to the dogs. African Union has never said anything about the government of Cameroon that is killing people in the Amazonian region. So I think us, like African, the lay people, the ordinary people, us, because we are the people who are concerned. We are the people who really want this change in Africa. For me, I think is a beautiful opportunity, and when this meeting was suggested, I was upbeat about it, and I said I will participate. And I hope that after this, we create a habit of coming together. We invite more people to this kind of conferences. We discuss these issues. There are so many issues to be discussed across Africa, and I think it's a very brilliant and a beautiful opportunity for us to have Africa at heart.
We as ordinary citizens, Africa united, we can be our own, form of the African Union. So as we're talking about it, I failed to mention in my intro that I'm so proud of the Zambian soccer team for canceling their their friendly game, I guess, in South Africa as a way to protest. I've seen protests happening in Zambia, and peaceful protest is what's important. It is so important, like I know many leaders have said, the pen is mightier than the sword. You can do so much more with your mouth than you can do with your fists. So thing, but do it in other countries. Don't go and hurt your South African brother who lives in London or who lives in Zambia just because of what's going on in South Africa. That does not fix the problem. That is the worst way to fix the problem. So yeah, I'm so glad I was part of this, and like I said, I'm in whatever we're gonna do.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Can I say something? Fred from Uganda.
Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah. So thank you so much, guys, for the contribution, and thanks, Abraham. I know Abraham added me to the group. Now, I just have three things that I think we really need to focus on. There are some questions that we need to answer. And of course, not everyone here has the answers to those questions, but we must continue to ask those questions. There is a political question where Abraham was saying we must be politically responsible and take charge of what's going on. One of the things is South Africa and many other African countries, we are so fast to distance ourselves from the political issues that are raising in our countries and causing issues such as what's happening in South Africa. I know in 2007, there was almost a similar incident in Kenya, but it was dealt with. They came together, sat around the table and started the conversation. It has been moving. It's not yet up to 100%, but it's been moving. That was a positive thing. So we must ask the political question. What are our politicians doing? And politicians in Africa are leaders. We call that is the team we call leadership. Now we must ask them, what are they doing about the situation? The second one is we must ask, what is the economic status of Africa as a whole? When it comes to the economic sector, the African Union, the World Bank, those are the institutions that mainly are concerned with these things. The politicians have their own issues. They always juggle from one country to another, looking for countries to lend them money and borrow. But the World Bank and African Union have a higher say and a higher stake, saying, why are your citizens so poor? Why is poverty every day deepening in South Africa? That question must be answered. And the third question is what we are doing as Africans in general. It's very disheartening that many of us look back and think that's a South African issue. Before you get your mother or your father or your son who is on a business trip, got, caught up in such a scenario and they lose their lives, it's a very, very sad thing. So we must ask a question. What is the rest of Africa doing? And what is the rest of the world doing? Because if we don't do that, then we make it look like it's only for that country. Yet the fight must be for everyone. So the three questions are very fundamental. And believe me, every small bit that we are doing, even as individuals, I'm so happy for this engagement, that mind shift change starts as a small thing, but usually it reaches out to thousands of people. And if this goes ahead, I feel like this is gonna change. It's gonna change the way people think. It's gonna change the way we think about each other. We all from different countries, but we're discussing an issue that affects all of us. So I want to thank anyone that came up with this idea. It's a very brilliant idea, and I hope we can build a better Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Peter from Rwanda. Also just wanted to add something small, I think, to stress out. Am I unmuted?
No, Peter, we can hear you.
You can hear me. Yeah, it's just, I think also to stress out, because we possibly will have our brothers from South Africa listening to this, and that's the hope of doing this. And I think something to stress is that the people who are doing this are a very small minority. It's not the South African people as a whole. And whenever these things happen, it's always a very small minority of people who go out and do these things, but then the reporting and how the thing comes out, it usually covers or it paints an entire nation with this brush. But I think something that a few of you have mentioned, which I think is important to also underline and highlight, is something that I think Claude and Abraham, you spoke about this, is negligence, is complicity. I believe even though there are few people who are out on the streets committing these acts of violence, there are many other people who are watching and doing nothing about it. And I believe that when Africans start standing up and all of us together, even when an issue doesn't affect us directly, we go out and we speak up for this issue, we get strength in numbers. I'm from Rwanda, and we have been dealing with a situation in our country for many years where there's been literally silence all over the continent. But recently we have a lot of African activists from neighboring countries and other places who are now speaking up for our issue in Rwanda. And you are finding that we're getting a lot of strength by the solidarity that we're receiving from our country. And the same thing is happening with other issues in Sudan and in Uganda and you name it. And I believe that stressing the fact that an issue in Africa should be owned by all of Africans in order for us to have strength in numbers, but also saying to South Africans that we know and recognize that this is not South Africa. This is a few people who have decided to act out their anger in violence against people who don't deserve this violence. But then we say that also silence is negligence. And again, it's just making an appeal to all South Africans to find a way in which they can speak out. If it is putting out a post on Twitter, if as Claude says, is going somewhere and going on the street to protest, if we are in the diaspora, but whatever someone can do, I believe that then you can say that I've done something to mitigate whatever is happening in South Africa. But sitting back and watching and just thinking in one's mind that this is wrong and doing nothing, I believe there is a level of negligence to that.
I'd like to say something. Our brother from Ghana said that we need to work on creating our economy and creating opportunities in our own countries. I want to agree to that. I also want to add that the African Union has two initiatives. One they call the Open Skies 2063. Whereby that the African Union wants by 2063, every other country in Africa, you can fly across African countries without necessarily requiring visa or a passport. There's also an initiative of African Free Trade Area, which was signed in Algeria the other day. I think Algeria the other day. That African Free Trade Area, and I think South Africa is also a member of that African Free Trade Area that requires that you can just walk across Africa and do business anywhere in parts of Africa, especially the member states. And I think up to more than 30 member states have already signed that document. So that one tells you that no matter what we are doing, we are headed to integration of the rest of Africa. So I think South Africa really needs to learn that we are going to integrate with the rest of Africa. Us in Kenya, we are learning that. We are accepting our brothers from Uganda, our brothers from Tanzania. They are here working. They are here doing business. We also walk into Uganda and do business there. We walk into Tanzania. We do business just with our national IDs. And I think it's an opportunity to tell the rest of Africa that Africa Free Trade Area and Open Skies is coming. So it's time that we start embracing our brothers across Africa. Thank you very much, Claude.
I just want to speak on the silence issue because I think it's definitely if you're silent and a crime is going on, you're definitely party to that crime as well. But I just like speaking for myself, my own personal view. If, for instance, your neighbor is physically abusing his wife, now, there's a school of thought to say if you've seen it, definitely report it, save the woman's life. But now, if there's another school of thought that says, what right do you have to go into someone else's jurisdiction and dictate? So maybe I'm not justifying the silence, but maybe the stance that maybe the AU has and various African leaders take in that everyone's got their own skeletons in their own closet, and you know, we keep our skeletons. Who wants to expose each other's skeletons? But nonetheless, as citizens, I think we should speak out and at every opportunity, you know, talk about it. Thank you.
The gentleman from Tanzania, I don't know whether I'm right. Yeah, he talked about African continental free trade. Yes, it's a brilliant idea, but I think for a start, it needs to be piloted among specific countries because an agreement is an agreement. We can have an agreement on paper, but practically, people may not work with it. Now, let's take ECOWAS, for instance, Economic Community of West African States. One of their principles is to allow member states to do free trading, let's say, international trading or intercountry trading. Unfortunately, some of these countries are proving to be hostile to some of the members of this ECOWAS. Let me take my country, for instance, Ghana. Recently, there was this fracas between some Ghanaian traders and Nigerian traders. Ghanaians have our own laws. One of the trade laws states that foreigners are not permitted to do retail trading in the country. But unfortunately, most of the foreigners, especially the Nigerians, are engaged in retail business, and it brought a whole lot of fracas. And so I think, yes, agreement is an agreement. It will be on paper, but I think, first of all, it has to be piloted. It has to be piloted among some countries to test its strengths and weaknesses before it is spread to the other parts of the African continent.
Thank you. I don't really have a lot to add. Everybody, I think everybody's covered it. I just want to thank everybody for putting your voice out in the public to support our sisters and brothers in South Africa. Again, as was said on the call, we do need to be patient with our South African brothers. At the same time, I think, you know, hold them accountable. We need to, as basically everything says on this call to me is the politicians won't do it, but we can do something about it. And I think we should. And I think every African person that knows, that cares, well, actually, you don't need to care. You just need to know. We should take action.